Captain Sarah Chun stared at the rejection letter for the third time that morning. The words burned into her memory like a brand. Griffin HX9 authorization denied. Insufficient field experience. She crumpled the paper and threw it across her small office at Fort Braxton. The Griffin HX9 was the military's newest tactical communication system. It could coordinate multiple units across vast distances, hack enemy frequencies, and provide real-time battlefield intelligence. Every special operations team wanted access to it. Sarah had spent 2 years studying the system, learning every circuit and protocol. But the authorization board saw only a 28-year-old communications officer who had never seen real combat. "Chen, you in there?" Major Roberts knocked on her door. Sarah quickly smoothed out the rejection letter and shoved it into her desk drawer. "Yes, sir. Come in." Roberts entered with his usual stern expression. Behind him walked a tall woman in dress blues with more medals than Sarah had ever seen on one uniform. The woman's silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes seemed to take in everything at once. "Captain Chun, this is General Patricia Morrison," Roberts said. "She's here for the quarterly communications review." Sarah snapped to attention. General Morrison was a legend. She had led peacekeeping missions in 3 different countries and survived an ambush in Afghanistan that killed half her unit. Sarah had read about her in military journals, but never imagined meeting her. "At ease, Captain," General Morrison said. Her voice was calm, but carried absolute authority. "I've been reviewing your file. Impressive work on the satellite relay improvements last year." "Thank you, General. I was just doing my job." "Major Roberts tells me you've been requesting Griffin HX9 authorization." "What?" Sarah felt her cheeks burn. Of course the general knew about her rejections. "I believe the system could revolutionize how we handle field communications, ma'am. Current equipment has too many vulnerabilities." General Morrison nodded slowly. "The authorization board thinks you lack field experience. What's your response to that?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists behind her back. This was it, her chance to defend herself to someone who actually mattered. "Ma'am, I've spent more time studying battlefield communication failures than most officers spend in actual combat. I know the Griffin system better than anyone on this base. Experience matters, but so does preparation and knowledge." Interesting perspective. General Morrison walked to Sarah's desk and noticed the corner of the rejection letter sticking out from the drawer. "May I?" Sarah's heart sank, but she nodded. The general pulled out the crumpled paper and read it carefully. "Third rejection," General Morrison observed. "Most people would have given up by now." "I don't give up easily, General." "Good. Neither do I." General Morrison folded the letter and handed it back. "Captain, I'm forming a new tactical unit for a classified mission. We need someone who knows advanced communication systems inside and out." "Interested?" Sarah blinked. This was not how she had imagined this meeting going. "Of course, General. What kind of mission?" "The kind where Griffin HX9 authorization becomes irrelevant, because you'll be field testing something even more advanced." General Morrison smiled for the first time since entering the office. "Pack light. We leave for Nevada in 6 hours." After the general left, Sarah sat in stunned silence. Major Roberts lingered in the doorway. "You know what this means, don't you, Chun?" Sarah shook her head. "Morrison doesn't invite people unless she thinks they're extraordinary. Half the officers on this base would kill for that opportunity." Roberts paused. "The other half are smart enough to be terrified of it." Sarah packed her gear with shaking hands. Everything she owned fit into 2 duffel bags. Her communications equipment took up most of the space, along with her laptop containing years of research notes on military communication systems. The flight to Nevada took 4 hours. Sarah spent most of it reviewing classified files General Morrison had given her. The mission details were sparse, but she gathered they would be testing new equipment in a simulated combat environment. Other team members included a demolitions expert, 2 snipers, a medic, and a pilot. When they landed, Sarah got her first look at the testing facility. It sprawled across the desert like a small city, with multiple training complexes, vehicle bays, and what looked like a massive communications array reaching toward the sky. "Welcome to Blackwater Training Facility," General Morrison said as they walked across the tarmac. "What you see here doesn't exist on any public maps." The team gathered in a briefing room filled with monitors and tactical displays. General Morrison stood at the front, her expression serious. "Ladies and gentlemen, you've been selected for Operation Firewall. Our objective is to test the Griffin XR-12, an experimental communication system that makes the HX-9 look like a children's toy." Sarah's eyes widened. She had heard rumors about the XR-12, but assumed it was years away from completion. The system allows real-time coordination between air, ground, and satellite assets. It can penetrate enemy jamming, decrypt hostile communications, and provide predictive battlefield analysis. General Morrison clicked a remote, and technical specifications filled the screens around the room. "Captain Chun will be our primary communications officer. Her job is to learn this system and find its weaknesses before it goes into full production." A gruff voice from the back of the room interrupted. "With respect, General, shouldn't this kind of testing be done by someone with actual combat experience?" Sarah turned to see a scarred veteran she recognized as Master Sergeant Rodriguez. His reputation for speaking his mind was almost as famous as his combat record. "Good question, Sergeant," General Morrison replied calmly. "Captain Chun, would you like to address that concern?" Sarah stood up, her mouth dry. Every eye in the room was on her. These were hardened combat veterans who had earned their stripes in the field. She was an untested communications officer who had never fired a shot in anger. "Sergeant Rodriguez is right," she began. "I don't have combat experience, but I do have something else." She walked to the front of the room and pulled up a technical diagram on the main screen. 6 months ago, a Marine unit in Syria lost contact with command during a firefight. 3 soldiers died because their communications were jammed by insurgents using modified cell phone equipment worth maybe $200. The room went quiet. I studied that incident for weeks. The communication failure wasn't because of bad equipment or poor training. It was because nobody thought to test how their expensive military radios would handle interference from cheap civilian electronics. Sarah changed the display to show another incident report. Last year in Afghanistan, an army convoy got separated from their escort because their GPS was spoofed by a $20 Chinese jamming device. 2 vehicles were destroyed before they figured out what was happening. She looked directly at Sergeant Rodriguez. "Combat experience is invaluable, Sergeant, but so is understanding how our enemies think about our technology. They don't have billion-dollar defense budgets. They use creativity, improvisation, and our own assumptions against us." Sarah clicked through several more examples. "Every communication system has vulnerabilities. My job isn't to make this equipment work in perfect conditions. It's to break it in every way possible so that when you take it into combat, it won't let you down." Sergeant Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Fair enough, Captain. Just don't get us killed while you're learning." General Morrison smiled. "I don't think that will be a problem, Sergeant. Training begins at 0600 tomorrow." Dismissed. As the team filed out, Sarah remained behind to study the technical specifications. The Griffin XR-12 was unlike anything she had ever seen. It used quantum encryption, satellite mesh networking, and artificial intelligence to create what the designers called an unbreakable communication web. "Impressive, isn't it?" General Morrison had returned to the briefing room. "It's incredible, General, but also terrifying." "How so?" Sarah pointed to a section of the technical manual. "This system is so advanced that it's almost like giving every soldier their own personal mission control. The amount of data it can process and distribute is staggering." "That's the point, Captain. Information superiority wins wars." "Yes, ma'am, but it also creates new vulnerabilities. The more complex a system becomes, the more ways it can fail." Sarah highlighted several technical specifications with her finger. "If an enemy figured out how to compromise this network, they wouldn't just disrupt our communications. They could feed us false information, redirect our units, even turn our own intelligence against us." General Morrison studied Sarah carefully. "You think like an engineer and a soldier simultaneously." That's exactly why you're here. Sarah spent the rest of the evening familiarizing herself with the XR-12 hardware. The device was roughly the size of a smartphone, but felt as solid as a brick. Its screen displayed multiple data streams simultaneously, and the interface was surprisingly intuitive despite its complexity. Her quarters were Spartan, but comfortable. Through her window, she could see the sprawling training complex lit by floodlights. In the distance, aircraft moved across the runway like mechanical insects. She opened her laptop and began documenting her initial impressions of the XR-12 system. This was her chance to prove that theoretical knowledge could be just as valuable as battlefield experience. The Authorization Board had rejected her requests, but General Morrison was giving her something better: the opportunity to shape the future of military communications. Sarah worked until well past midnight, creating detailed notes and potential testing scenarios. She thought about every communication failure she had studied, every vulnerability she had identified in existing systems. Tomorrow, she would begin the most important work of her career. As she finally prepared for sleep, Sarah looked once more at the crumpled rejection letter on her desk. Griffin HX-9 authorization denied. Insufficient field experience. Soon, she would be testing equipment that made the HX-9 obsolete. Sometimes the best revenge was simply being better than your critics expected. The next morning would bring new challenges, but Sarah felt ready. She had spent years preparing for an opportunity like this. Now it was time to prove that knowledge, determination, and fresh perspective could be just as powerful as traditional experience. Outside her window, the desert wind howled across the training facility, carrying the promise of trials to come. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Sarah was already awake. She had spent most of the night thinking about the day ahead. Today would be her first real test with the Griffin XR-12 system, and she knew the entire team would be watching for any sign of weakness. The training complex buzzed with activity even at this early hour. Sarah grabbed coffee and joined the team in the equipment bay, where technicians were preparing their gear. The Griffin XR-12 units sat in reinforced cases, looking deceptively simple despite their revolutionary capabilities. "Morning, Captain." Sergeant Rodriguez approached with a neutral expression. "Ready for your first day of real work." "Ready as I can be, Sergeant." Sarah picked up one of the XR-12 units and began her pre-flight check. The device powered up smoothly, its screen displaying system status and available networks. General Morrison entered the bay wearing full combat gear. "Today we're running a basic field test. 3-team coordination exercise across a 10-kilometer range. Captain Shun, you'll be coordinating all communications from the command post. Teams Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie will be attempting to reach 3 separate objectives while maintaining constant contact." Sarah reviewed the mission parameters on her tablet. The exercise seemed straightforward enough, but she knew military operations rarely went according to plan. "What kind of interference should I expect, General?" "Unknown factors are part of the test, Captain. Your job is to adapt as situations develop." The teams deployed 30 minutes later. Sarah established herself in the command post, a reinforced trailer filled with monitors and communication equipment. The Griffin XR-12 system integrated seamlessly with the existing hardware, creating a comprehensive view of the battlefield that was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Through her headset, Sarah could hear all 3 teams clearly. Alpha Team was advancing toward a mock enemy position on the northern ridge. Bravo Team was conducting reconnaissance in a valley to the east. Charlie Team was setting up overwatch positions on elevated terrain. "All teams, this is command. Communications check, over." Alpha Team, loud and clear. "Bravo Team, good copy." Charlie Team, reading you 5 by 5. Sarah smiled. The XR-12 system was performing flawlessly. She could see each team member's position on her tactical display, monitor their vital signs, and even access helmet camera feeds when necessary. 20 minutes into the exercise, problems began to emerge. "Command, this is Alpha 6, came the voice of Lieutenant Torres, Alpha Team's leader. We're taking simulated fire from an unexpected position. Looks like the enemy force is larger than briefed. Sarah quickly switched to satellite view and saw additional heat signatures moving toward Alpha Team's position. The exercise controllers were throwing variables at them, just as General Morrison had warned. Alpha 6, I see enemy movement from your southwest. Recommend falling back to grid 347 to 129 and wait for support. Roger, command. Moving to new position. Sarah coordinated the extraction smoothly, directing Bravo Team to provide covering fire while Charlie Team moved to cut off enemy reinforcements. The XR-12 system made it easy to track multiple moving elements simultaneously. Then, everything went wrong at once. Command Alpha 6. We've lost GPS. Navigation systems are down. Sarah's tactical display flickered and showed error messages where Alpha Team's position markers had been moments before. She quickly ran diagnostics on the XR-12 system, but everything appeared normal on her end. Bravo 4, this is command. Do you have eyes on Alpha Team's last known position? Static filled her headset for several seconds before Sergeant Rodriguez's voice came through, distorted but understandable. Command Bravo 4. Negative on Alpha Team. Our electronics are acting strange too. Compass is spinning like a top. Sarah felt ice in her stomach. This wasn't part of the exercise. Something was genuinely wrong with their equipment. She switched to emergency protocols and tried to raise General Morrison on the backup radio, but got only static. The XR-12 system showed all green lights, but clearly the teams in the field were experiencing major technical difficulties. All teams, this is command. Switch to backup communication systems immediately. Report status on emergency frequencies. One by one, the teams checked in using older radio equipment. Everyone was safe, but their advanced navigation and communication gear was completely unreliable. Only the basic backup systems were functioning normally. Sarah spent the next hour troubleshooting the problem while the exercise continued in degraded mode. She ran every diagnostic she knew, checked satellite connections, and analyzed system logs. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The Griffin XR-12 system was working perfectly, but something in the environment was interfering with the other electronic equipment. When the teams returned to base, Sarah was waiting with a preliminary report. General Morrison gathered everyone in the briefing room to discuss what had happened. Equipment failure? The general asked. No, ma'am, Sarah replied. Equipment interference. The Griffin XR-12 system was broadcasting on frequencies that conflicted with our other electronics. It wasn't supposed to happen according to the technical specifications, but field conditions revealed a problem that lab testing missed. Sergeant Rodriguez shook his head. So, our super advanced communications system disabled our basic navigation gear? That's a hell of a design flaw. It's more than a design flaw, Sarah said quietly. It's a security vulnerability. If our own advanced systems can interfere with our basic equipment, imagine what an enemy could do with targeted jamming. General Morrison leaned forward. Explain. Sarah moved to the whiteboard and began drawing diagrams. The XR-12 uses quantum frequency hopping to avoid detection and jamming, but it cycles through the entire electromagnetic spectrum, including frequencies used by GPS, radio navigation, and backup communication systems. She drew frequency bands on the board. In laboratory conditions, the system's filters prevent interference. But in the field with multiple units operating simultaneously and atmospheric conditions affecting signal propagation, those filters aren't enough. So the system works perfectly until you actually need to use it in combat, Lieutenant Torres summarized. Worse than that, Sarah continued. An enemy who understood this vulnerability could trigger the interference deliberately. They could force us to choose between using our most advanced communication system or maintaining basic navigation and emergency communications. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications of what Sarah was describing. General Morrison stood up. Captain Shun, you've identified a critical flaw that could have gotten people killed in actual combat. What's your recommendation? Sarah had been thinking about this question since the equipment failures began. We need to redesign the frequency management protocols. The XR-12 system needs to actively monitor for interference with friendly equipment and adjust its broadcast patterns accordingly. How long would that take? If I had access to the system's core programming and a team of engineers, maybe 6 months to implement and test properly. You don't have 6 months, Captain. You have 6 days. This system is scheduled for field deployment next week. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. General, with respect, that's not enough time to fix a fundamental design problem. Then don't fix it. Work around it. General Morrison's expression was serious, but not unsympathetic. Captain, this is your chance to prove that theoretical knowledge can solve real-world problems. Find a way. After the briefing, Sarah returned to her quarters with a stack of technical manuals and her laptop. She had 6 days to solve a problem that the original design team hadn't even recognized existed. She started by analyzing the interference patterns from today's exercise. The XR-12 system logged every frequency it used and every signal it detected. By comparing this data with the timing of equipment failures, Sarah could map exactly which frequencies were causing problems. The patterns were complex, but not random. The interference occurred when multiple XR-12 units synchronized their frequency hopping algorithms. Instead of avoiding each other's signals, they were accidentally amplifying them in ways that disrupted nearby electronics. Sarah worked through the night, surviving on coffee and determination. By morning, she had identified the core problem. The XR-12 units were too smart for their own good. Their artificial intelligence was optimizing communication efficiency without considering the impact on other systems. The solution wasn't to make the system less capable, but to make it more aware of its environment. Sarah began writing code that would allow each XR-12 unit to detect and avoid interference with friendly equipment automatically. By the second day, she had a working prototype. By the fourth day, she was testing it with simulated battlefield conditions. By the sixth day, she was ready to demonstrate the fix to General Morrison and the team. "This is impressive work, Captain," General Morrison said after reviewing Sarah's technical documentation. "But can you guarantee it will work in actual combat?" Sarah looked at the faces around the briefing room. These people would be depending on her solution with their lives. "No, General. I can't guarantee anything. But I can tell you that this fix addresses the root cause of the interference problem and includes safeguards to prevent similar issues in the future." Sergeant Rodriguez spoke up. "That's an honest answer, Captain. More honest than we usually get from technical experts." "The system deploys next week," General Morrison announced. "Captain Shun, you're going with it. Congratulations, you just earned your field experience." Sarah felt excitement and terror in equal measure. This was what she had wanted for years, but now that it was happening, the responsibility felt overwhelming. That evening, she called her parents for the first time since arriving in Nevada. She couldn't tell them about her work, but she needed to hear familiar voices. "You sound different, sweetheart," her mother observed. "More confident, maybe." "I think I'm finally doing work that matters, Mom." "It's always mattered, Sarah. Now you're just in a position where other people can see it too." After hanging up, Sarah packed her gear for deployment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but she felt ready to face them. She had proven that fresh perspective and determination could solve problems that experience alone couldn't handle. The rejection letters didn't seem important anymore. Sarah was about to get all the field experience she could ever want. The transport helicopter thundered across the Afghan landscape, carrying Sarah toward her first real combat deployment. 3 weeks had passed since the Nevada testing, and now she was accompanying General Morrison's tactical unit on what was supposed to be a routine diplomatic escort mission. Sarah checked her equipment for the 10th time. The modified Griffin XR-12 system sat securely in its case, along with backup communication gear and her laptop containing the interference prevention software she had developed. Everything had tested perfectly during training, but she knew that combat had a way of revealing problems that no simulation could predict. "Nervous, Captain?" Sergeant Rodriguez sat across from her, his expression more friendly than it had been during their first meeting. Terrified, Sarah admitted. This is my first real deployment. Good. Scared people pay attention to details. Overconfident people get dead. Rodriguez checked his weapon and smiled grimly. Just remember your training and do your job. We'll handle the rest. General Morrison moved through the helicopter, checking on each team member. When she reached Sarah, she leaned close to speak over the engine noise. Intel suggests this should be straightforward, Captain. We're escorting Ambassador Williams to a peace negotiation in Kandahar. Local tribal leaders want to discuss cooperation agreements. What's our communication requirement, General? Maintain contact with command every 30 minutes, coordinate with local Afghan forces, and be ready for immediate extraction if things go sideways. General Morrison paused. The XR-12 system will be crucial if we encounter problems. These negotiations have failed before, sometimes violently. The helicopter landed at a forward operating base 20 kilometers from Kandahar. Sarah got her first real look at a combat zone. Concrete barriers, razor wire, and soldiers moving with the careful alertness of people who knew that danger could come from any direction. Ambassador Williams was a distinguished woman in her 50s who seemed remarkably calm, considering they were about to enter potentially hostile territory. She greeted General Morrison warmly and nodded politely when introduced to Sarah. Captain Chun is our communications specialist, General Morrison explained. She'll be ensuring we stay connected to support assets throughout the mission. Excellent, Ambassador Williams replied. I've learned to appreciate good communications in places like this. It's often the difference between successful diplomacy and unfortunate incidents. The convoy consisted of 3 armored vehicles carrying the diplomatic team, General Morrison's security detail, and Sarah's communication equipment. Sarah rode in the lead vehicle with General Morrison, constantly monitoring radio traffic and satellite communications. The Griffin XR-12 system performed flawlessly during the drive to Kandahar. Sarah maintained contact with the base, tracked local radio frequencies, and coordinated with Afghan army units providing additional security. The interference problems from Nevada seemed to be completely resolved. This is much smoother than my last deployment, commented Lieutenant Torres, who was driving their vehicle. Usually our radios cut out every few minutes in this terrain. Don't jinx it, Sarah replied, but she felt pleased that her technical modifications were working so well under real conditions. The peace negotiations were held in a compound owned by a respected tribal elder. The building was old but well-maintained, with thick walls that would provide good protection if needed. Sarah set up her communication post in a side room where she could monitor all frequencies while staying close enough to coordinate with the security team. For the first 2 hours, everything proceeded normally. Sarah checked in with base on schedule, monitored local radio traffic, and tracked the positions of friendly forces in the area. The XR-12 system provided such clear situational awareness that she felt like she was watching the entire region from above. Then, she noticed something unusual in the communication intercepts. General, Sarah called quietly over her headset. I'm picking up coordinated radio traffic on insurgent frequencies. Multiple groups moving toward our position. General Morrison's voice came back immediately. How many? What's their timeline? Sarah analyzed the signal patterns and cross-referenced them with her threat database. At least 3 groups, maybe 40 personnel total. They're using code words consistent with planned attack protocols. Estimated time to contact, 20 minutes. Damn, Ambassador Williams is just getting to the crucial part of the negotiations. General Morrison paused. Can you determine their specific intentions? Are they planning to attack during the talks or wait for us to leave? Sarah switched the XR-12 system to active surveillance mode, using its advanced capabilities to penetrate the insurgents' communication security. What she found made her blood run cold. General, they're not just planning an attack. They're planning to capture Ambassador Williams and hold her hostage. They know about the peace negotiations and want to disrupt them publicly. Copy that. Stand by for orders. Sarah continued monitoring the insurgent communications while General Morrison coordinated with the diplomatic team. The situation was developing rapidly, and the enemy was moving faster than anticipated. "Captain Chun," came General Morrison's urgent voice. "I need you to patch me through to Afghan Army Command and the air support unit simultaneously. We're going to need immediate assistance." Sarah's fingers flew across the XR-12 interface. Within seconds, she had established a secure conference call connecting General Morrison with military leaders across the region. The system's quantum encryption meant the insurgents couldn't intercept their coordination efforts. "All stations, this is Bravo 6. General Morrison spoke calmly into her microphone. "We have credible intelligence of imminent attack on diplomatic mission in Kandahar. Requesting immediate support." The responses came back quickly. Afghan army units were moving to reinforce their position, but the closest was 15 minutes away. Air support was available, but needed precise targeting information to avoid civilian casualties. Sarah realized that her communication system was about to become the nerve center for a complex military operation. Everything she had studied about battlefield coordination was about to be tested under the most intense circumstances imaginable. "Insurgent groups are splitting up," Sarah reported as she tracked the enemy movements. "One group is moving to block our exit route. Another is positioning for direct assault, and the third appears to be setting up mortar positions on the ridge overlooking the compound. Can you give me exact coordinates for targeting?" General Morrison asked. Sarah hesitated. Providing targeting information meant she would be directly responsible for combat actions that could result in casualties. This was far beyond anything she had trained for. "Captain, I need those coordinates now." General Morrison's voice was urgent but not harsh. Sarah took a deep breath and began transmitting precise location data to the air support unit. The XR-12 system's satellite integration allowed her to provide targeting information accurate to within 2 meters. "Coordinates transmitted, General. Air support confirms receipt and is moving to engage." Meanwhile, Sarah continued coordinating with ground units while keeping Ambassador Williams and General Morrison informed of the developing situation. The peace negotiations had been suspended, but the tribal leaders were cooperating fully with security measures. "Captain," Sergeant Rodriguez's voice crackled over the radio. "Can you patch me through to the Afghan army units? I need to coordinate our defensive positions." Sarah quickly established the connection while simultaneously monitoring insurgent communications and tracking friendly force movements. The XR-12 system was handling multiple data streams flawlessly, but she was beginning to feel overwhelmed by the pace of events. Then, disaster struck. "All stations, this is air support," came a voice over the radio. "We're experiencing GPS interference. Unable to maintain accurate targeting. Requesting backup navigation assistance." Sarah's heart stopped. The same interference problems that had plagued them in Nevada were happening here, in actual combat, with lives on the line. "Air support, this is command. Stand by for alternative targeting assistance." General Morrison replied calmly, but Sarah could hear the tension in her voice. Sarah's mind raced through possible solutions. The XR-12 system was working perfectly, but the aircraft's older navigation equipment was being affected by electromagnetic interference from unknown sources. "General, I can use the XR-12 system to provide real-time targeting guidance directly to the aircraft," Sarah said quickly. "The quantum communication protocols should be immune to whatever's causing their GPS problems." "Do it." Sarah had never attempted anything like this before, but her technical training kicked in. She established a direct data link with the aircraft and began transmitting navigation and targeting information in real time. "Air support, this is communications. You should now have backup navigation data on your secondary display. Confirm, communications. We have your signal. Beginning attack run." Sarah watched on her tactical display as the aircraft moved toward the insurgent positions. Her targeting data was guiding weapons that would determine the success or failure of their mission. The airstrikes were devastatingly accurate. Within minutes, the insurgent mortar positions were destroyed, and the groups moving to attack the compound were scattered. Sarah's real-time coordination had allowed precision strikes that neutralized the threat while avoiding civilian casualties. "Outstanding work, Captain," General Morrison said over the radio. "Your system just saved a lot of lives." But Sarah wasn't finished yet. She had detected additional insurgent communications suggesting reinforcements were en route. The immediate threat was over, but they needed to evacuate quickly before facing a much larger enemy force. "General, recommend immediate extraction," Sarah reported. "I'm seeing communication traffic indicating significant enemy reinforcements moving toward our position. We have maybe 30 minutes before the situation becomes untenable." "Agreed. All teams, prepare for immediate departure." Sarah coordinated the extraction with military precision that surprised even herself. She guided the convoy along routes that avoided known enemy positions, maintained communication with covering forces, and provided real-time intelligence updates as the situation evolved. Ambassador Williams completed her evacuation with a dignity befitting her position, but Sarah could see the relief in her eyes when they reached the safety of the forward operating base. "Captain Chen," General Morrison approached as Sarah packed up her equipment. "That was exceptional work under pressure. You coordinated a complex operation while under fire and prevented what could have been a diplomatic disaster." Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I just did my job, General." "No, Captain. You did much more than that. You proved that the right person with the right technology can change the outcome of impossible situations." That evening, Sarah called her parents again, though she still couldn't tell them about her work. "You sound different again," her mother observed. "More serious this time." "I think I finally understand what my job really means, Mom." Sarah had gone to Afghanistan as an untested communications officer carrying experimental equipment. She was returning as a combat veteran who had proven that technical expertise and innovative thinking could be just as valuable as traditional military experience. The authorization letters that had once seemed so important were now completely irrelevant. Sarah had authorization from something much more meaningful: the knowledge that her skills could save lives and change outcomes when it mattered most. 6 months after Afghanistan, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the Pentagon briefing room facing a panel of senior military officials. The room was filled with generals, colonels, and civilian defense contractors, all gathered to hear her report on the Griffin XR-12 field testing program. Sarah had changed significantly since her first rejection for Griffin HX-9 authorization. The nervous officer who had crumpled rejection letters in her small office at Fort Braxton was gone, replaced by someone who had proven herself under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. "Ladies and gentlemen," General Morrison announced from the front of the room, "Captain Chun will present her comprehensive analysis of advanced battlefield communication systems, based on her recent field experience with classified technology." Sarah stepped to the podium, her presentation materials displayed on multiple screens around the room. She no longer felt intimidated by high-ranking officials or technical experts. Her work spoke for itself. "The Griffin XR-12 system has undergone extensive testing under actual combat conditions," Sarah began. "I'm here to report both its capabilities and its limitations, along with recommendations for future development." She clicked to her first slide, showing a map of the Afghanistan operation where she had coordinated airstrikes and evacuation procedures. During a hostile engagement in Kandahar province, the XR-12 system enabled real-time coordination between ground forces, air support, and local military units while under direct enemy fire. The system's quantum encryption and frequency management protocols performed flawlessly despite attempts at electronic warfare by hostile forces. A general in the front row raised his hand. "Captain, how does this compare to existing communication systems? We've invested billions in current technology." Sarah had anticipated this question. "Sir, existing systems work well under normal conditions, but they have fundamental vulnerabilities that become critical during complex operations. The XR-12 system's artificial intelligence adapts to changing conditions in ways that fixed protocol systems cannot match. She clicked to a technical diagram showing signal interference patterns. However, the system's advanced capabilities create new challenges. During testing in Nevada, we discovered that the XR-12 could interfere with standard military equipment if not properly configured. What kind of interference? Asked a civilian contractor. GPS navigation failures, radio communication blackouts, and electronic countermeasure malfunctions, Sarah replied directly. The system was too powerful for its own good. It was like giving someone a race car without teaching them how to control it. A colonel leaned forward. How did you solve this problem, Captain? Sarah smiled slightly. I didn't solve it initially. I worked around it by developing adaptive software that allows the system to monitor its own electromagnetic footprint and adjust automatically to prevent interference with friendly equipment. She displayed code excerpts and test results on the screens. The solution required the system to become aware of its environment in ways the original designers hadn't considered. Instead of just optimizing for communication efficiency, it now optimizes for overall mission effectiveness. General Morrison stepped forward. Captain Shun, please describe the operational impact of your modifications. Yes, General. Sarah switched to a new set of slides showing mission timelines and success metrics. During the Kandahar operation, modified XR-12 systems coordinated successful precision airstrikes while maintaining communication with 7 different military units across a 40-kilometer area. Previous systems would have required multiple communication officers and significantly more time to achieve the same level of coordination. The room was quiet as the officials absorbed the implications of what Sarah was describing. More importantly, Sarah continued, the system prevented a diplomatic crisis by providing advance warning of enemy movements and enabling rapid response coordination. Ambassador Williams completed her mission safely because we had early intelligence and the communication capabilities to act on it effectively. A general from the Joint Chiefs stood up. Captain, what's your recommendation for full-scale deployment? Sarah had been preparing for this moment for months. Her answer would influence military communication capabilities for years to come. Sir, I recommend limited deployment with mandatory technical training for all operators. The XR-12 system is incredibly powerful, but it requires users who understand both its capabilities and its limitations. We can't just hand out advanced technology and expect optimal results. She clicked to her final slide, showing a proposed training program timeline. I've developed a comprehensive training curriculum based on actual field experience. Officers need to understand not just how to operate the system, but how to think strategically about communication in complex environments. How long would this training take? Another general asked. 12 weeks for basic certification, 6 additional weeks for advanced tactical applications, Sarah replied. It's a significant investment, but the alternative is deploying powerful technology that operators can't use effectively. After her presentation, Sarah was approached by numerous officials wanting to discuss technical details and implementation strategies. The conversation that mattered most, however, came from an unexpected source. Captain Shun, a voice called as she was packing up her materials. Sarah turned to see a familiar figure approaching. Colonel Patterson, Sarah said, recognizing the officer who had chaired the authorization board that had rejected her Griffin HX-9 requests. It's good to see you again, sir. Colonel Patterson looked uncomfortable. Captain, I owe you an apology. The authorization board was wrong to reject your applications based solely on field experience requirements. Sarah felt a mix of vindication and embarrassment. Sir, you were working with the information available at the time. Field experience is important. Yes, but so is innovation and fresh thinking, Colonel Patterson replied. Your work has revolutionized how we think about battlefield communications. The board should have recognized your potential instead of focusing only on traditional qualifications. Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you. Colonel Patterson handed her an official document. This might mean more. It's your approval for advanced communication systems, training, and certification. Retroactively, it includes authorization for Griffin HX-9, XR-12, and any future systems you're qualified to operate. Sarah looked at the authorization certificate, remembering how desperately she had wanted similar approval just a year ago. Now it seemed almost anticlimactic. She had moved far beyond needing permission to prove herself. "There's one more thing, Captain," Colonel Patterson continued. "General Morrison has recommended you for promotion to Major and assignment as Director of the new Advanced Communication Systems Training Program." Interested, Sarah felt her world shift. A year ago, she had been a frustrated junior officer begging for access to advanced equipment. Now she was being offered the opportunity to shape how the entire military approached communication technology. "Yes, sir." Very interested. 3 weeks later, Major Sarah Chun stood in her new office at the Advanced Communication Systems Training Center. The facility was larger and more sophisticated than anything she had imagined when she was writing rejection appeals in her small office at Fort Braxton. Her first class of students included experienced combat veterans, technical specialists, and junior officers eager to master the latest communication technology. Many were older and more experienced than Sarah, but they listened respectfully as she shared lessons learned from actual battlefield applications. "The most important thing to understand about advanced communication systems," Sarah told her students during their first session, "is that technology alone doesn't win battles. Technology gives you options, but you need to understand how to use those options strategically." She clicked to a slide showing the Kandahar operation timeline. "During this mission, our success came not from having the most advanced equipment, but from understanding how to adapt that equipment to changing circumstances in real time." A veteran master sergeant raised his hand. "Major, how do you develop that kind of adaptability?" "Experience helps, but more importantly, you need to understand the principles behind the technology," Sarah replied. "When you know why something works, you can figure out how to make it work better when conditions change." After class, Sarah returned to her office to review reports from ongoing XR-12 deployments around the world. The system was performing well, but she continued to identify areas for improvement based on field feedback. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Major, you have a call from Afghanistan. General Morrison." Sarah picked up the secure phone. "General, how can I help you?" "Sarah, I need your expertise on a developing situation. We're facing communication challenges in a joint operation with Allied forces, and I think your training program graduates might be the solution." "What's the situation, General?" "Multiple nations, multiple communication systems, multiple languages, and a very narrow window for coordinated action." "Sound familiar?" Sarah smiled. "Very familiar, General. Send me the technical specifications and operational requirements. I'll put together a team." As she hung up the phone, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. The rejection letters that had once devastated her were now framed on her wall as a reminder of how persistence and innovation could overcome institutional barriers. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Saw your promotion announcement in the military newsletter. So proud of you, sweetheart." Sarah typed back, "Thanks, Mom. I'm finally doing work that feels meaningful." That evening, Sarah worked late preparing for the new mission General Morrison had described. She selected team members from recent training program graduates, analyzed technical requirements for multinational communication coordination, and developed preliminary operational protocols. The work was challenging and demanding, but Sarah felt energized rather than overwhelmed. She had found her place in the military, not as someone who followed existing procedures, but as someone who developed new capabilities and trained others to use them effectively. A year ago, Sarah had been desperate for authorization to use the Griffin HX9 system. Now, she was the person who decided who got authorization for the most advanced communication technology in the world. The authorization board's rejection had led her down a path that ultimately gave her more influence and impact than she had ever imagined possible. As Sarah prepared to leave her office, she paused at the window overlooking the training center's communication array. Dozens of antennas and satellite dishes reached toward the sky, representing the technological foundation that kept military forces connected around the world. Somewhere in Afghanistan, teams were using communication systems that she had helped develop and improve. Somewhere else, officers were applying training techniques that she had created based on real battlefield experience. Her work was making a difference in ways that went far beyond any individual authorization or approval. Sarah turned off her office lights and headed home, already planning the next day's challenges. She had proven that determination, innovation, and fresh perspective could overcome any institutional barrier. More importantly, she had learned that true success came not from gaining permission to do important work, but from creating opportunities to make meaningful contributions. The rejected applications were ancient history now. Sarah Chun had become someone whose authorization mattered more than any authorization she could receive.